He didn't say a word, just zipped his suitcase, looked at me once, not with anger, not even guilt, just emptiness. Then he walked out the door. An hour later, his phone rang. It was my lawyer, and that's when everything I thought I knew about love, marriage, and loyalty shattered in one silent click. I'm glad you're here because I need to tell this, all of it, exactly how it happened. Not because I want pity, but because I want someone, anyone, to hear how fast an ordinary life can turn into a lie. I live in a quiet suburb just outside Denver. I used to think that silence meant safety, the sound of normal life. You know, sprinklers hissing in the morning, kids on bikes, couples arguing softly behind thin walls. That was my world. I was 34, married for 8 years, no kids yet, though we were trying, or at least that's what I believed. My husband's name was Daniel. Everyone liked him. The kind of man who remembered birthdays, who fixed porch lights for neighbors, who laughed at every dad joke like he invented them. I was proud of him, of us. We looked stable, unshakable. When people asked how we met, I used to smile like it was a fairy tale. We met at a friend's barbecue. I dropped a plate of corn on the cob, and he bent down to help me, joking that, "It's destiny, butter binds souls." Stupid, I know, but it stuck. We dated, fell in love in the messy movie way. Late-night drives, long talks, bad takeout. He made me feel like I could finally stop performing for love. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We had rhythms, coffee together every morning, no phones after 9, and the Sunday pancake ritual that made our kitchen smell like burnt syrup and peace. Looking back now, I think that's what hurts the most, how ordinary it all was before it broke. Because when you live inside something long enough, you can't tell when it starts to rot. It started like any other day. A Wednesday, I think. I remember because I was wearing my midweek survival outfit. Stretchy jeans, messy bun, no makeup, just existing. Daniel had been quieter lately, but I chalked it up to work stress. He worked in real estate. Lots of late calls, weird hours, big deals. Sometimes he came home smelling like someone else's perfume, but he'd laugh it off. "Oh, the client hugged me," he'd say, and I'd believe him. Because why wouldn't I? That's what trust is, believing even when something feels off. That morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving, said, "Don't wait up tonight." His voice was flat. Not cold, just distant, like someone reading a script. Still, I didn't think much of it. I made coffee, answered emails, folded laundry. Normal things. Then around 6 in the evening, I heard the sound of wheels on tile. I turned around, and there he was, rolling a suitcase across the floor. My brain didn't even process it at first. I thought maybe he was going on a last-minute business trip, but then I saw his eyes. Empty, silent, done. "Daniel?" I said, my voice breaking in the middle. "Where are you going?" He didn't answer. He just zipped the bag, stood there for a heartbeat, and said, "You'll be fine." That was it. No fight, no tears, no explanation. The door clicked behind him, and the silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space he left behind. It's strange how your body still expects sound, footsteps, breathing, presence, even when the person is gone. I don't remember sitting down. I just remember shaking. Half of me wanted to chase him, demand answers. The other half was frozen. You tell yourself you'd scream or cry, but when the world collapses quietly, you just go quiet too. I sat there staring at his phone on the counter. He'd left it charging. Daniel never went anywhere without his phone. That's how I knew, deep down, this wasn't a break. It was an ending. The next 60 minutes were the longest of my life. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just waited for something, anything, to make sense. Then the phone rang. And the name flashing on the screen was my lawyer. I remember whispering, "What?" Like maybe I'd misread it. I picked it up, and everything after that became a blur. A blur that I'll untangle for you soon. But at that moment, all I could think was this. He didn't leave me. He planned to disappear, and that's where my story really begins. Not with heartbreak, but with silence. Because silence is where truth hides first. When he walked out that door, I thought I lost my husband. But what I didn't know was that I was about to lose everything else too. The house, the money, the friends who'd already picked sides before I even knew there were sides. Still, I had no idea that the phone call that followed would flip the script, that within 1 hour, I'd go from abandoned wife to the one holding all the power. But before we get there, I need to take you back to when everything still felt safe, because that's the only way to understand how deep the betrayal really went. When I think back on the months before that day, it feels like watching someone else's life. A woman who smiled too easily, who believed that love was proof against slow decay, who never thought to check if the ground under her feet was still solid. That woman was me. And she was happy. Or at least she thought she was. Daniel and I had what people call a comfortable marriage. We'd been together long enough to have our own language, half sentences, looks across rooms, private jokes that made no sense to anyone else. We weren't wild or dramatic. We were steady, predictable. He worked in real estate. I ran a small online design business from home, logos, websites, branding for local shops. We paid our bills, saved a little each month, even planned to renovate the kitchen that summer. Our house wasn't fancy, but it was ours. White siding, tiny porch, a yard big enough for a garden I never quite finished. The kind of place people drive by and think, that's where life is supposed to happen. And in a way, it did. We had Friday night takeout. We argued about the thermostat. We stayed up late watching documentaries neither of us cared about. We were normal. So normal that sometimes I mistook routine for security. Looking back, I see how easy it was to mistake peace for neglect. We'd gotten used to each other's presence the way you get used to background noise, comforting until it stops. I knew his habits by heart. He always left his wallet on the dresser, his keys in the bowl by the door. He whistled when he was nervous. He cracked his knuckles before bad news. And every night before bed, he'd brush his teeth, look in the mirror and say, "One more day, babe. We're doing okay." Used to make me smile. But toward the end, the way he said it felt different. Like he was trying to convince himself. We'd been trying to start a family for a while. 2 years, maybe. It wasn't working, and it started to wear on us. Or maybe just on me. I was the one charting cycles, reading forums, tracking everything. He was supportive at first, holding my hand during appointments, making jokes to keep things light. But slowly, he started to pull away. He stopped coming to the doctor visits. Said it made him uncomfortable, that it felt too clinical. I tried not to take it personally, but every maybe next time from him felt heavier. I remember one night in particular. We were sitting in bed. I was scrolling through adoption stories online, half excited, half scared. He glanced over, sighed, and said, "Can we not talk about this tonight? I just want to sleep." It was small, a tired moment. But something in his tone, that mix of irritation and finality, made my stomach twist. That was the first time I wondered if we were dreaming different dreams. Still, I brushed it off. That's what you do in marriage. You tell yourself love is enough, that it's just a phase, that work stress or hormones or exhaustion will explain it all. And maybe for a while it does, because right after that he became sweet again. Brought home flowers one evening, lilies my favorite. Cooked dinner, played our wedding playlist while we ate. I remember thinking, see? Everything's fine. We're fine. That was my first mistake, believing that grand gestures erase quiet distance. Daniel's work life was always a blur of deals and late-night calls. He was ambitious, the kind of man who chased success like it owed him something. At first I admired that. It made me feel safe, knowing he had plans. But lately, his networking dinners had multiplied. His phone buzzed constantly, face down on the table. When I'd ask who it was, he'd smile and say, "Clients, babe. You wouldn't care about the details." And I didn't push. Because when you trust someone, you don't want to sound suspicious. You want to be the easy partner, the one who doesn't nag. So I let the little things slide. The smell of perfume on his shirt, The extra credit card charges. The way he started sleeping with his phone under the pillow. Each one was small enough to ignore. But together, they formed a pattern I couldn't unsee once I noticed it. My best friend Lila used to tease me. "You trust that man too much," she'd say. And I'd laugh. "You're just cynical." She'd been through a divorce. Messy, ugly, full of lawyers and blame. I thought I was different. I thought we were different. I didn't realize I was already living in the prequel to her story. There was one night that still plays on repeat in my head. Daniel came home late, past midnight. His shirt was half untucked, his tie missing, eyes glassy with exhaustion or something else. He kissed my forehead and said, "Sorry. Long day." Then he walked straight into the shower. When I picked up his jacket to hang it, a folded paper slipped out. It was a restaurant receipt, 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, 1 dessert. The timestamp read 10:47 p.m. He hadn't been working. He'd been out to dinner. My chest tightened, but instead of confronting him, I folded the receipt back into his jacket. I told myself maybe it was a client dinner. Maybe he just didn't want to worry me. I wanted to believe the smaller pain over the larger truth. Because once you say the words, "Is he cheating?" you can't take them back. And if he isn't, you've poisoned everything anyway. The next morning, he was all smiles again. Made pancakes, brewed coffee, even packed me lunch, because you forget to eat when you're working. It was the most normal morning imaginable. And that's when I realized something. Normal can be the cruelest disguise of all, because if someone wants to hide, the safest place to do it is inside your routine. Inside your trust. Inside the version of them you already believe in. That week, I remember standing in the shower, tracing the tiles, thinking, something's wrong. I just can't name it yet. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, like a thread pulling loose. He'd stopped touching me the same way. His hugs were shorter. His laughter delayed. His eyes, those soft brown eyes I'd fallen in love with, started avoiding mine. When I'd ask, "Are you okay?" he'd smile, tired, and say, "Just tired, babe, just tired," and I'd nod. Because that's what you do when love makes you blind. You nod at the lie and hope it turns true. Our last happy weekend was the 1st in March. We went hiking in the Rockies, something we hadn't done in years. The air was thin, the sun sharp. We took pictures at the summit, him grinning, me flushed and laughing. That night, he held me tighter than usual. I remember whispering, "I missed this." He kissed my hair and said, "Me too." I didn't know that was the last time he'd ever hold me like that. If I had to pinpoint the moment the shift became real, it was the week after that trip. He started keeping his laptop closed, even at home. He'd step outside to take calls, saying, "It's loud in here." And sometimes I'd hear him talking softly, almost whispering. Once I caught a name, Anna. I asked who she was. He said, "A client. She's buying a condo," and I let it go. Because who was I to question every name, every sound? You can't live in suspicion without losing your sanity. But that name, Anna, it stuck in my mind, like a splinter under the skin. Still, I kept playing my role. The good wife, the understanding partner, the woman who made excuses for the man she loved, until the day came when there were no more excuses left to make. Because when he finally packed that suitcase, I realized he hadn't just left our home. He'd been leaving me piece by piece for months. I just hadn't noticed it happening. But the cruelest part wasn't that he left. It was that he'd already written the ending before I even knew there was a story to end. And as I stood there in that silence after the door closed, I understood something chilling. Whatever had been happening between us, it wasn't sudden. It was deliberate, a long, slow escape disguised as ordinary life. And I was about to find out exactly how deep that deception went. After Daniel left that night, I didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. I sat on the couch with the lights off, the house humming around me, refrigerator, clock, wind, sounds that suddenly felt hostile. His phone was still on the counter, screen dark, like a loaded gun waiting to go off. For a long time, I didn't touch it. I just stared at it, heart pounding, torn between fear and curiosity. If I opened it, I'd know. And if I knew, I'd have to face everything I'd been pretending not to see. Then it rang. The sound cut through the silence like glass breaking. And when I saw the name flashing on the screen, my lawyer, something inside me twisted. My lawyer's name is Susan Palmer. She's been my family's attorney since before I married Daniel, helped me with contracts for my business, even drafted our prenup. A calm, level-headed woman who doesn't call without reason. So why was she calling his phone? I hesitated, then answered. Hello? There was a pause, then Susan's voice clipped and cautious. Daniel? I swallowed hard. No, it's me. This is his wife. Another pause. Then, slowly, she said, Oh, I see. Her tone changed. Softer, but uncertain, like she was trying to decide what to say. Could you tell Daniel I was following up on the papers? Papers? I asked. What papers? Silence, too long. Too deliberate. I'm sorry, she said finally. He didn't tell you? My throat closed. Tell me what? But she didn't answer that. She just said, maybe it's better you two talk first, and hung up. That click, that tiny sound, was louder than his suitcase rolling away. Because in that moment, I knew the truth wasn't just about another woman. It was something bigger. I stood there, phone pressed to my chest, trying to breathe. Papers. That word looped in my head. My mind went through every possibility. Divorce papers? Property? A new deal? But no matter how I spun it, the weight in my stomach said one thing. He'd planned this, because no one's lawyer calls your phone by accident. And no lawyer uses the word papers like it's nothing. I tried calling his number. Straight to voicemail. Then I texted him. Once, twice, 5 times. Daniel, what's going on? Please call me. I just need to know you're okay. Nothing. The silence stretched into morning. The bed stayed cold. His clothes were gone. His toothbrush. His cologne. Every small trace of him. Carefully erased. It was as if he'd been preparing for this for weeks. That thought made my hands shake. I sat down at the kitchen table where his phone still sat charging. And I realized I didn't even need to unlock it. The screen lit up every few minutes with notifications, emails, texts, alerts. Enough to tell a story even without the details. The first name I saw was Anna. Of course. The same name I'd heard him whisper weeks ago. There were messages from her, dozens, all previewed on the screen. Call me when you're done. Did you tell her yet? Everything's ready. My stomach turned cold. Each new message was like a match lighting in the dark. Bits of conversations that made sense only in pieces. But the pattern was clear. She knew something I didn't. I wanted to scroll, to see it all, but the phone was locked. 6 digits between me and the truth. I thought about guessing the code, his birthday, our anniversary, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. Instead, I sat there shaking, whispering to myself, everything's ready for what? Around noon, Susan called my phone. This time, I answered immediately. Please, I said before she could speak, just tell me what's happening. There was another long pause. Then she sighed. Look, I shouldn't be saying this without his consent. But since he's unreachable, please, I begged. She hesitated, then said, he asked me to review the separation documents last week. He said you both agreed. I felt my heart stop. Agreed? I repeated. We didn't agree to anything. I didn't even know. There was quiet on the line. Then Susan said softly, then you should probably come by my office. The drive to her office felt endless. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight they went numb. I remember catching my reflection at a red light. Pale face, messy hair, eyes wide like a stranger's. By the time I parked, my legs were trembling. Susan met me in the lobby, expression neutral but wary. She led me into her office, closed the door, and pulled a thin folder from her desk. This is what he had me review, she said. I reached for it, fingers cold. Inside were neatly printed documents, Headers, signatures, the whole thing. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed under Daniel Harris versus Claire Harris. Seeing my name there, not as a wife but as a respondent, made my chest ache. I flipped through the pages, eyes darting over legal phrases that blurred together. He'd listed irreconcilable differences. He'd requested full rights to the house and joint savings, citing that he'd solely contributed since 2019. It was all lies. Every word, and at the bottom his signature, bold, clean, familiar. Susan watched me carefully. "Claire, I'm sorry. I assumed you were both in agreement." I shook my head, tears burning. He told me nothing. Not one word. It's hard to describe the kind of anger that doesn't scream, the kind that just burns quietly, steady, focused. That's what I felt driving home. Every red light, every passing car, every song on the radio, all of it blurred into static. All I could think was he planned this. He planned it. The dinners, the late nights, the distance. It had all been groundwork. Not for a breakup, but an ambush. I'd been sleeping beside someone who was slowly dismantling my life while still smiling at me across the breakfast table. When I got home, I opened his laptop. The password was the same, his mother's birthday. He hadn't bothered to change it. Inside, the truth waited like rot behind a wall. Emails, messages, photos, and one folder named Property Transfer. I opened it. There were scanned documents, deeds, bank statements, transaction drafts. He'd been moving assets. Our savings account, the one we built together, had been emptied the week before. Transferred to a new account under his name only, and listed as a co-signer on several of those transfers was a name I already knew too well. Anna McKay. My first instinct wasn't to cry, it was to laugh. A sharp, humorless sound that startled even me. I whispered, "Of course. Of course it's her." Everything clicked into place. The perfume, the late nights, the receipt, the distance. He hadn't just been cheating. He'd been preparing to replace me. That realization hit harder than betrayal, because it wasn't impulsive. It was organized, strategic, cruel. I sat there until the sun went down, staring at the laptop screen, scrolling through the evidence of my own oblivion. Every email was a nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. One message from him to her read, "After this week, it's all official. She won't know what hit her." Another from her. "Finally. I'm tired of being the secret." My breath caught. I closed the laptop and pressed my forehead against my knees, whispering, "Don't break." Not yet, because I knew if I broke then, I'd never get back up. That night, I sat in the dark, surrounded by the remnants of our life, photos, his clothes, the wedding album. I ran my fingers over the pictures, each one now feeling like a lie frozen in time. Part of me still wanted to believe there was an explanation, that somehow there'd been a mistake, that maybe he'd panicked or someone had manipulated him, but deep down, I knew better. Daniel wasn't impulsive. He was careful, always careful. If he'd done this, it was because he wanted to. And yet, underneath the shock, another feeling started to grow, something sharp and steady, like a heartbeat returning after a long pause. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even grief. It was clarity. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw things for what they were. The signs, the excuses, the slow unraveling, all the little red flags I'd folded into white ones, and I realized the worst was probably still ahead, because men like Daniel don't just leave quietly. They make sure they win before they walk out. That night, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't let him win. Not like this. Not after everything he took without even asking. But to fight him, I'd need more than pain. I'd need proof. And patience. And I had both. Because if he wanted a silent war, he'd just declared it against the wrong woman. I didn't sleep that night either. It was like my body forgot how. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the folder name again, Property Transfer, and those emails, those words. She won't know what hit her. He'd said that about me. The woman who made his coffee every morning, who washed his clothes, who believed in him even when no one else did. I felt hollow. Numb and raw at the same time. You'd think rage comes like fire, hot, loud, uncontrollable. But it doesn't. Not at first. It comes as a cold clarity, the kind that freezes your thoughts until all that's left is a list. And on that list was one goal: find out everything. The next morning, I started digging. Daniel wasn't stupid. He was careful, but not flawless. He'd deleted messages, cleared his call logs, but he forgot about his synced cloud drive. Every file he saved, every email attachment, every shared document, it was all mirrored there. And I had access. Inside one of the folders, I found an email chain titled Project M Final Draft. At first, I thought it was business. But when I opened it, my breath caught. There it was, correspondence between him and Anna McKay. They weren't discussing property listings. They were planning our assets, what to liquidate, what to claim, what to hide. She wasn't his client. She was his co-conspirator. Reading their words felt like watching a slow-motion car crash I couldn't stop. Daniel, once it's filed, she can't touch the joint account. Keep the new one private. Anna, already transferred the amount. Should I set up the new property in my name or yours? Daniel, yours cleaner that way. We'll fix it after. Anna, got it. When do you plan to tell her? Daniel, not until it's official. The lawyer thinks it'll be smooth. I scrolled down, hand shaking so hard I could barely hold the mouse. There were attachments, documents labeled investment proposal, schedule transfer, and one named after. That last one made me hesitate. I clicked it anyway. It was a photo. Daniel and Anna, standing on a beach somewhere. Him in sunglasses, her in a white dress, their fingers laced together. Caption: After everything settles. My chest physically hurt. It was like being punched from the inside, because that wasn't just a fling. That was a plan, a future. A life they'd built quietly while dismantling mine. I remember whispering, "Why?" out loud as if the screen might answer. Why wasn't I enough? Why pretend all this time? Why say I love you at night and plan my erasure in the morning? But the truth is, there's no good answer to betrayal. There's just the echo of your own disbelief. I didn't tell anyone. Not Lila, not my parents, no one. I was too ashamed, because that's what betrayal does. It makes you feel like the guilty one. Like you must have done something to deserve it. Like if you were smarter, prettier, calmer, he wouldn't have left. So I stayed silent. But I didn't stop looking. By day 3, I'd mapped out the entire puzzle. His bank accounts, 2 closed, 1 new. Our joint savings, drained. Our house, listed under potential transfer. And buried deep in one of his emails was a scanned document of something I hadn't expected. A power of attorney form. It wasn't filed yet, but it was signed. By me. Except I hadn't signed it. I leaned closer, zooming in on the signature. It looked like mine. Almost perfect. But I knew my handwriting. This one had a slight slant I never used. He'd forged it. That was when the numbness cracked. I slammed the laptop shut and screamed. It wasn't loud, not enough to alert the neighbors, but enough to echo off the walls. Enough to make me finally feel something besides quiet horror. I called Susan again, voice trembling. "Check the documents," I said. "He forged my signature." There was a pause. "Claire, are you sure?" "Yes, positive," she sighed. "Okay, don't confront him yet. If it's forgery, we can act on it. Bring me everything." So I did. The next day, I sat in her office again, watching as she flipped through printouts. Her expression changed from confusion to anger. "This isn't just divorce," she said finally. "He's committing fraud. If he tried to move assets with forged documents, that's criminal." The words criminal and my husband in the same sentence didn't feel real. But there it was. She told me to sit tight, not to contact him, not to tip him off. She'd start preparing a case quietly. "Get all your accounts secured," she said. "Change your passwords. Freeze joint credit cards. Don't give him time to adjust. Her calm voice kept me grounded. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't drowning alone. When I left her office, I didn't go home right away. I drove to the old park where Daniel and I used to sit when we were dating, the one with the broken fountain and the peeling benches. It was empty, cold, quiet. I sat there for hours, watching the sunlight fade, thinking about all the years I'd given to a man who'd already replaced me before I even knew we were broken. And still, a part of me missed him. That's the cruel thing about love. Even when it rots, some part of your heart keeps reaching for it. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I unlocked his phone. I'd found the passcode, not a date, but a word. M. Her initials. When I entered it, the phone opened instantly, and there it was, their whole secret world. Text chains full of "I miss you," "I can't wait till it's over," "You deserve better than her." Photos. Voice notes. A life built in the shadows of mine. One message stood out, from 2 days before he left. Daniel. Tomorrow I'll tell her. Then it's done, Anna. I'll have champagne waiting, champagne. They were celebrating my collapse. I read every message one by one until I reached the bottom. The last text she'd sent just an hour before he left said, "Remember, no drama. Just leave. Let the papers speak. No drama. Just leave." And he had. Without a word. Without a fight. Without giving me the chance to even ask why. I sat there with his phone in my lap, staring at those words, until the rage finally came. Not the cold kind and the burning kind, the kind that makes you want to tear down everything false and start over. I realized then that he hadn't just broken my heart. He'd underestimated me. He thought I'd crumble quietly, sign whatever was put in front of me, fade into the background while he built his shiny new life. He didn't know who I was without him, and that was about to change. The next morning, I started documenting everything. Every email, every message, every file. I printed copies, stored backups, even recorded videos explaining what I'd found, just in case. Susan called again. "I've filed for a motion to freeze the joint assets," she said. "He'll find out soon." "Be ready." "Ready for what?" "For his reaction," she said. "Men like him don't expect consequences." She was right. Because 2 days later, my phone buzzed at 10:13 a.m., Daniel calling. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My finger hovered over the screen, then I pressed answer. There was silence for a few seconds. Then his voice, calm, low, rehearsed. "Claire, we need to talk." I said nothing. He sighed. "I didn't want it to happen like this." "Like what?" I asked, my voice cold. "You mean the part where you forged my signature? Or where you emptied our savings?" There was a pause, then, "You don't understand." I was trying to make it easier. I laughed. The same humorless sound from before. "For who?" He didn't answer. "Don't call me again," I said. "If you have something to say, tell it to my lawyer." And then I hung up. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. But peace didn't last long. Because that night, I got an email from an unknown address. Subject: "You think you can play this game?" The body just said, "You'll regret making this difficult." No signature, no name. But I knew it was him. That was the moment the fear crept back in. But this time, it came with resolve. If he wanted a game, fine. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was done being his victim. Now I was building my own plan, and it would start with one phone call. Not to him, but to Susan. Because I wasn't going to wait for justice. I was going to make it happen. There's a strange calm that comes after the storm. It's not peace exactly, more like the silence after a gunshot. Your ears still ring, your hands still shake, but your mind, it goes quiet, focused, sharp. That's where I was. Past heartbreak. Past disbelief. Standing on the other side of what he'd done, staring into the wreckage of our life. Realizing I had two choices, stay broken or get strategic. And I've never been good at staying broken. The morning after that threatening email, I woke up before sunrise. The house was cold. Still smelled faintly like his cologne, like habit. But something in me had changed. I didn't cry. I didn't check my phone. I just made coffee, black, bitter, steady, and opened my laptop. I created a folder titled Rebuild. Inside it, I wrote 3 subfolders: evidence, plan, future. Because if he could plan to erase me, then I could plan to outlive him. The first step was simple: control what I could: money, property, reputation. Susan had already started freezing accounts, but I went further. I closed every joint card. I moved my design clients' payments to a new account. I changed passwords, canceled subscriptions, rerouted mail. It felt mechanical, almost clinical. Every click, every password reset, every call to the bank. It was like reclaiming tiny pieces of myself he'd quietly stolen, and with each piece, I felt stronger. By midday, I was at Susan's office again. She looked up when I walked in, surprised by my steadiness. "You're early," she said. "I'm ready," I replied. We sat down, and I laid out everything I'd found: the forged signature, the property transfers, the texts. She flipped through the stack, eyes widening slightly. "This is airtight," she murmured. "Claire, do you realize what this means?" I nodded. "He's not just leaving me. He's defrauding me." She nodded slowly. "And if we can prove he forged your name, he's also committing a felony." I didn't flinch. "Good. Let's make it count." She smiled, not with amusement, but with respect. "I'll prepare an injunction. But you should know, once we file this, it won't stay quiet for long." "I don't need quiet," I said. "I need truth," and I meant it. Because silence had protected him long enough. Over the next few days, I learned more about the woman who'd helped dismantle my life. Anna McKay, age 31, marketing consultant, divorced, no kids. Her LinkedIn was full of motivational quotes about new beginnings and manifesting happiness. I almost laughed. She wasn't manifesting happiness. She was manifesting mine. Through public records, I found the property they'd been discussing, a lakefront condo listed under her name. Photos online showed an empty living room staged for sale. But when I cross-checked the address with the emails, I saw something strange. A utilities account had been opened there under Daniel's name. It wasn't just their dream property. It was their new home. I took screenshots, printed records, noted dates. Every piece of proof added another layer to the plan forming in my mind. Susan wanted to proceed through the courts, and we would. But I wanted something more personal. Not revenge, exactly. Just balance. A correction to the story he'd written about me. The one where I was disposable. If he wanted to leave without a word, I wanted the world to hear every single one he tried to hide. That night, I drafted an email. Subject line: regarding Daniel Harris, misrepresentation of assets. I sent it to his firm's HR department. Attached: the forged documents, a list of financial discrepancies, and a note. Submitted for transparency regarding potential conflict of interest and fraud in professional dealings. I didn't sign it. Didn't have to. I knew their compliance department would trace it back anyway, and that was the point. Within hours, I received an automated reply confirming receipt. That was all I needed, because if Daniel valued anything more than his ego, it was his reputation. And I'd just placed a crack right down the middle of it. For days, I heard nothing. No calls, no messages. The quiet was almost eerie, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, it started. A voicemail from him. "Claire, what did you do?" Then another. "Do you understand what you've set in motion? You're ruining everything." I listened to both, twice, then deleted them. He still didn't get it. He thought I was ruining his life. He couldn't see he'd already ruined mine, and I was just leveling the field. That night, I met with Susan again. She'd drafted everything: the fraud claim, the injunction, the motion to secure assets. But what she said next made me pause. "Claire, we can hit him with criminal charges. But you should be prepared. He'll retaliate. Men like him don't admit defeat." "I'm not looking for an apology," I said. I'm looking for accountability. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. I'll file it in the morning. When I left her office, the sky was beginning to darken, soft blue melting into violet. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, breathing the cold air, realizing this was the first time I'd felt calm in weeks. I wasn't a wife waiting for closure anymore. I was a woman building her own ending, and as I stood there, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. You think this will save you? I stared at it for a long time. Then typed back, it already did, and hit send. In the days that followed, the pieces began to shift. His firm called me, politely, formally, to confirm a few details. They didn't say much, but I could tell from their tone that something was unraveling on his end. A few of our mutual friends reached out cautiously. Is everything okay with Daniel? One asked. He's been saying some strange things. I just said, you'll see soon enough. Because the truth has a way of surfacing, even when people try to bury it. But even as I built my case, I found myself reflecting. About love, about what I'd tolerated, about how easy it is to lose yourself trying to save someone who doesn't want saving. I realized I'd spent years shrinking, trying to be gentle, understanding, forgiving. Thinking that made me strong. But real strength isn't softness that bends until it breaks. It's knowing when to stop bending, and I'd finally stopped. One night, I opened an old photo album, not digital, the real kind. There we were, younger, happier, oblivious. His arm around me, his smile wide, my eyes full of something that now looked like naivety. I didn't tear the photos. I didn't burn them. I just closed the book, whispered, "Thank you for teaching me what not to love," and put it away. That was the moment I knew I was done being angry. Anger is heavy, but truth is clean, and soon, everyone would see it. Susan called 2 days later. It's filed, she said. He's been served. I felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. What happens now? She exhaled. Now we wait, and we let him react. Because his reaction will tell us everything we need to know. She was right. Because the very next morning, I heard the first sign of fallout. Not from him, but from her. An email. From Anna McKay. The subject line, "You didn't have to drag me into this." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short message. I had no idea it would go this far. I didn't know about the forgery. I thought you should know I'm out. He's on his own now. I almost laughed. Out. Like this was just a project she could quit. But I didn't reply. She wasn't my problem. She was a symptom of his choices, not the cause. Still, I saved the email. Evidence was evidence. That evening, Susan called again. I just got word from his firm, she said. They're investigating. Internal audit. Possible suspension. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Good." She paused. You sound calm. I am, I said. For the first time. Because this wasn't vengeance. It was restoration. He'd built his escape like a chess match, assuming I was a pawn. But pawns can reach the end of the board too, and when they do, they change what they are. Still, even with everything moving in my favor, I wasn't naive enough to think it was over. There would be hearings, documents, courtrooms. There would be whispers from people who didn't know the truth. But I wasn't afraid of any of it. Because now I wasn't reacting. I was directing. The game had flipped. And for the first time in months, I was the one writing the story. It started with a knock. 3 weeks after the filing, a sharp, deliberate knock that echoed through the quiet house. When I opened the door, a courier stood there, holding a thick envelope. "Delivery for Daniel Harris," he said. I stared at the name for a moment, then smiled faintly. "He doesn't live here anymore," I said. "But I'll make sure he gets it." I knew what it was. The formal notice of the fraud investigation. And with it, the beginning of his unraveling. An hour later, my phone rang. This time, I recognized the number. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Silence on the other end, then his voice, tight, panicked. "What the hell did you do, Claire?" I didn't raise my voice. "I told the truth. You've destroyed my career." "No," I said softly. "You destroyed it when you decided to forge my name." He cursed, his breathing uneven. "Do you even know what you've done?" "I could lose everything." I closed my eyes, steady. "You already did." He tried again, softer this time. "Look, maybe we can fix this. Just drop it. I'll transfer the money back." "Well, stop!" My voice cut through him. "You don't get to offer peace after war. We're done." And then I hung up. For the first time, I was the one who ended the conversation. The next few days moved fast. His firm suspended him pending investigation. The fraud case was processed by the state's Financial Crimes Unit. And through it all, I stayed quiet. No public outbursts. No dramatic posts. Just patience. Because silence had always been his weapon. Now, it was mine. But then came the confrontation I didn't plan for. It was a Saturday morning. I was coming back from the grocery store when I saw his car parked outside my house. My stomach dropped. He was leaning against it, arms crossed, eyes dark. For a moment, I thought about driving away, but then I remembered everything he'd done, and I got out. He watched me walk up, that familiar smirk flickering. "You made your point," he said. "Not yet," I replied. He laughed, sharp. "You think this changes anything? You're still alone. You've got nothing without me." I stepped closer, calm, deliberate. "Maybe, but at least I earned what I have." His jaw tightened. "You're going to regret this, Claire." "No," I said, steady. "You are." He reached for the envelope I was holding, the copy of the charges. "Don't do this," he said. I met his eyes. "You already did." And then, almost perfectly timed, a car pulled up behind him. Susan's. She got out, holding her own stack of papers. "This conversation's over, Daniel," she said. "You've been officially served." His face drained of color. He looked between us, between the woman he underestimated and the lawyer who now represented the consequences of his choices. "This is insane," he muttered. "No," I said quietly. "It's justice." He turned, slammed his car door, and drove off without another word. The sound of his tires fading down the street felt like a door locking behind me. Later that afternoon, I got an email from Susan. Subject, case update. Inside, one sentence. "He's agreed to a full financial restitution and withdrawal of property claims to avoid prosecution." I exhaled so deeply it felt like months of weight left my body. It was over. The money, the house, the name, all legally secured in my hands. He'd surrendered, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt, still, justice doesn't bring joy. It just brings balance. 2 days later, the news reached his circle. His suspension became public. His company released a statement. Pending internal review of ethical violations. It spread fast, faster than I expected. Lila called me that night. "Holy hell, Claire. Everyone's talking about it. Are you okay?" I smiled faintly. "Better than I've been in years." She was quiet for a moment. "You did it. You really did it." "I just told the truth," I said again. But this time it didn't sound defensive. It sounded final. Then a week later, something unexpected happened. I got a letter, not an email. A real letter. Handwritten, shaky. It was from Anna. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. He lied to me too. He told me you were separated. That you agreed to everything. When I found out the truth, I left him. I've started over. I hope you can too. I read it twice." It didn't make me forgive her. But it made me realize something important. Daniel wasn't just a liar. He was an artist of manipulation. He painted whatever picture people wanted to see, and for a long time, I was his favorite canvas. Not anymore. The day of the court hearing, I dressed simply. Black blouse, hair tied back, minimal makeup. I wasn't there to perform. He sat across the room, eyes down, shoulders tense. When the judge asked if both parties agreed to the settlement, I said, "Yes." He hesitated, then muttered, "Yes," and that was it. Years of love, betrayal, silence, finalized in a courtroom with 2 signatures and a quiet gavel strike. When it was over, I walked out without looking back. Because there's no power in watching someone fall. The power is in knowing you stood back up. Outside the courthouse, Susan caught up to me. "It's done," she said, handing me a folder. "Officially closed." I nodded, looking up at the sunlight. It felt different that day. Not warmer, just real. "No lies under it?" She smiled gently. "You handled this with more grace than most people I've met." I laughed softly. Grace or adrenaline, still deciding. Then I hugged her. Not just because she'd been my lawyer, but because she'd been my witness. Someone who saw the worst of it and never made me feel small. That evening, I went home and opened my laptop. Deleted every photo, every message, every trace of him left in my digital life. Then, without thinking too hard, I opened the folder I'd made weeks ago. Rebuild. I clicked into the subfolder labeled Future. It was empty. So I opened a blank document and wrote one sentence. "I survived." Then another. "Now I'll live." 3 days later, his car was gone from town. Mutual friends said he'd moved to another state, started over quietly. I didn't care where. Some people never stop running because they can't face themselves. But I wasn't running anymore. I was walking, slowly, deliberately, toward something better. A week later, I finally did something I hadn't done in months. I slept through the night. No nightmares. No sudden jolts awake. Just steady breathing in a house that finally felt mine. And when I woke up the next morning, I brewed coffee and sat by the window. The light hit differently now. Softer. Forgiving. I realized then, I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace, and peace, once you earn it, is the sweetest victory there is. That night, as the sun dipped low, I stood by the porch, the same one where he'd once kissed me goodbye without meaning it, and whispered, "Goodbye, Daniel." Not bitter. Not angry. Just done, because sometimes the real climax isn't the moment they fall. It's the moment you finally let go. After the court hearing, life didn't suddenly turn beautiful again. There wasn't a cinematic sunrise, no magical sense of freedom. It was quieter than that, and heavier in a strange way. Because when a storm finally passes, it doesn't leave you lighter. It leaves debris, memories, bruises, echoes of what used to be. I had to face all of it, slowly, deliberately. For the first few weeks, I kept expecting him to call. Not because I wanted him to, but because 8 years of habit doesn't disappear overnight. Every time my phone buzzed, a small part of me still braced for his name. It never came. And with every day of silence, I learned how to breathe on my own again. The house felt foreign at first. Every corner carried a ghost of him. His shoes by the door, his dent in the couch, his handwriting on the grocery list still stuck to the fridge. I didn't throw things away all at once. I did it slowly, in small pieces, like peeling off an old bandage. One day I boxed up his clothes. Another, I painted the living room. By the 3rd week, I'd replaced the couch entirely. It wasn't about erasing him. It was about reclaiming space, turning a place of betrayal into a home again. Lila came over often in those early days. She didn't ask questions, she just showed up with takeout, blankets, and those terrible rom-coms she loved. One night, she said quietly, "You're handling this better than anyone I've ever seen." I smiled, tired. "You didn't see me the first few nights." She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think he never knew who he married. You always had more fight in you than you showed." I didn't answer right away. But later that night, when I was alone again, her words stayed with me. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd forgotten what kind of woman I really was until he forced me to remember. I started working again, slowly. My design clients were patient. Most of them didn't even know what had happened. It felt strange to focus on colors and fonts after everything, but also grounding. There's something healing about creating beauty again, even in small things. One morning, while designing a logo for a bakery, I realized I'd gone a full hour without thinking about him. That realization brought tears to my eyes, not from sadness but relief. Because healing doesn't come with grand gestures. It sneaks in quietly in moments like that. The first time I went out alone, really out beyond errands, I felt like I was learning how to exist again. I went to a coffee shop downtown, ordered something new just to see what I liked without his opinion shaping it. I sat by the window sipping slowly, watching strangers walk by. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone. It sounds small, but it felt monumental. Because freedom doesn't announce itself. It whispers. Financially, things stabilized faster than I expected. With Susan's help, I regained full ownership of the house and business accounts. The settlement included restitution, a quiet way of saying he'd paid for what he'd done. I didn't touch that money for a long time. It didn't feel clean. Instead, I opened a separate account and named it Restart. That's where I put every dollar I earned afterward. It wasn't about the amount. It was about ownership. Every deposit felt like proof that I was rebuilding something that was truly mine. Sometimes, though, memories came back uninvited. A song we used to dance to, the smell of his cologne on someone passing by, even a sentence from an old movie that sounded like something he once said. At first, they hurt. Then they just existed. Like background noise, I realized healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without collapsing. One evening, I found myself on the back porch, watching the sun set over the fence. The same view we used to share. But this time it didn't feel haunted. It felt earned. The air was still, the sky soft gold, the kind of calm that comes when you finally stop waiting for the next disaster. And I thought to myself, this is what survival feels like. Not fireworks, just stillness. Weeks turned into months. The legal mess faded. The whispers in our social circle died down. People moved on, and so did I. I took a short trip by myself, my first solo vacation ever. A little cabin near a lake, just me, a few books, and quiet mornings with coffee and birdsong. The first night I cried, not from sadness, but from disbelief that I'd made it here, alone, intact. By the second night, I started to smile again. One morning, while walking by the water, I thought about something Susan said once. Justice doesn't fix everything, but it clears the space for you to start again. She was right, because standing there with the sunlight on my face and no one's shadow over it, I finally understood what starting again really meant. It didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant owning it, scars and all, and choosing to live anyway. When I returned home, I made small changes. I planted herbs in the kitchen window, adopted a rescue dog named Milo, a quiet, anxious little thing who, like me, was learning to trust again. We fit. The house stopped feeling like a reminder of him. It started feeling like a reflection of me. Sometimes I still think about the woman I was before all of this, the one who believed that love was enough. I don't judge her anymore. She was kind. She was loyal. She loved deeply. She just didn't know that love needs truth to survive, and when truth left, she learned to stand on her own. I'm proud of her now. Because without her heart, and her breaking, I wouldn't have become this version of myself. Every now and then, people ask if I'd ever forgive him. The truth is, forgiveness isn't a gift you give the person who hurt you. It's something you give yourself, when you're ready, and maybe one day I will. Not for him, but so the last trace of his shadow leaves my mind completely. But not yet. Right now, I'm okay with peace without forgiveness. It's enough. The biggest change came quietly one afternoon. I got a message from a new client, a woman starting a nonprofit for people rebuilding after divorce. She said she'd found me through word of mouth and liked how honest my work felt. That word stuck with me, honest. Because that's what my whole life had become now. No more pretending. No more half-truths. Just me. Raw, flawed, still healing, but honest. That night, I poured a glass of wine, sat on the porch with Milo at my feet, and finally felt something close to happiness. Not the kind I used to chase, not the everything's perfect kind. This was quieter, steadier. The kind that comes when you stop needing someone else to validate your worth. I whispered into the evening. You did it. You made it back. And for the first time in so long, I actually believed it. When I went to bed that night, I didn't double-check the locks or glance at my phone. I just turned off the light, let the room fill with darkness, and slept, deeply, peacefully, because for the first time in years, there was no one left to lie to me. And no one left for me to lie to myself about. It's strange, looking back now, how something that once felt like the end of the world became the beginning of my real life. If you told me back then, on the day he walked out with his suitcase, that I'd one day be sitting here telling this story without shaking, I wouldn't have believed you, because back then, I didn't think survival looked like this. I thought survival meant holding on. But it doesn't. It means knowing when to let go. In the months that followed the court hearing, I kept expecting closure to come like a wave, big, sudden, powerful. But it never did. It came slowly in quiet, ordinary moments, folding laundry, watering plants, laughing with Lila about something stupid. Waking up one morning and realizing I hadn't thought of him at all the day before, that's what real healing looks like. It's not dramatic. It's every day. Sometimes people message me, friends, acquaintances, even strangers who heard parts of what happened, and they ask, "How did you do it? How did you stay so calm?" And the truth is, I didn't. Not at first. There were nights I screamed into pillows, mornings I couldn't get out of bed. There were days I wanted to text him just to make the silence end. Healing isn't neat. It's messy and slow and full of relapses, but one day you realize the pain doesn't own you anymore. It's still there. It always will be. But it stops defining you. And that's when you start living again. Now, when I walk past a mirror, I sometimes catch myself smiling for no reason. Not because everything's perfect, but because I'm proud of myself. Because I faced something that could have destroyed me, and instead, it rebuilt me. I think the biggest lesson I learned is this: love doesn't excuse betrayal. Understanding doesn't erase accountability. And forgiveness, when it finally comes, is something you give yourself, not the person who hurt you. I used to think justice meant making him feel the same pain I did. But now I know better. Justice is waking up without fear. It's making your own coffee, in your own kitchen, in a home that no longer feels haunted. It's knowing you can trust yourself again, because you saw the worst and didn't lose who you are. That's what healing truly is. Remembering your own worth after someone tried to make you forget it. Still keep the folder on my computer, the one labeled Rebuild. Not because I need the evidence anymore, but because it reminds me of who I became through it all. Every document in there tells a story, not just of betrayal, but of resilience. And sometimes, when I'm having a hard day, I open that folder, scroll through it, and whisper, "You made it." Because I did. I haven't seen Daniel since the court hearing. Last I heard, he moved to another city and started over. Again. I don't hate him anymore. I don't wish him pain. I just don't wish him anything. That's how you know you've let go. When their name stops stirring emotion, and instead just becomes another closed chapter. People say closure is something you find together, but I don't think that's true. Closure is something you create for yourself when you stop chasing explanations. A few months ago, I stood on that same porch where he'd left me. The night was quiet, the sky full of stars. I looked up and whispered, "Thank you for leaving, not out of bitterness, out of gratitude, because him leaving gave me back to myself. And that's a gift I never knew I needed. Now I live differently. I move slower. I notice things, the smell of morning coffee, the way Milo curls at my feet when I'm reading, the soft creak of the floorboards under bare feet. All those small things that used to get drowned out by chaos. Peace used to feel boring to me, Now it feels like luxury, and I don't take it for granted anymore. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone listening, anyone who's ever been blindsided, betrayed, or broken, it's this: you will survive. Even when it doesn't feel like it, even when your whole world burns down around you, you will rebuild. Not the same, not perfectly, but honestly, because pain doesn't end you. It introduces you to yourself. Sometimes when I tell this story, people ask, would you ever fall in love again? The answer is yes, but differently. Not with blind trust or desperation. With awareness. With boundaries. With eyes wide open. Love, when it's right, doesn't need to hide behind lies. It doesn't demand you lose yourself to keep it alive. It meets you where you are, whole, scarred, real, and says, I see you anyway. That's the kind of love I'm waiting for now. And if it never comes, that's okay too, because I already found the most important kind: self-love. Sometimes I still think about the phone call that started it all, his phone ringing with my lawyer's name on the screen. Back then, I thought that moment marked the destruction of my life. Now I see it differently. It was the moment my story began, because every ending that feels like ruin is really just a beginning in disguise. I'm sharing this story not because I want sympathy, but because I know someone out there is sitting in the same silence I once sat in, waiting for answers that will never come. If that's you, I want you to know. You're not crazy for believing, and you're not weak for breaking. You're human, and you'll be okay. You don't need them to apologize to start healing. You just need to decide that their actions no longer define your worth. Healing takes time. Rebuilding takes courage. And sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is wake up and say, I'm still here, because survival isn't loud. It's quiet, persistent, and full of small victories no one sees but you. So if today all you did was breathe, that's enough. If all you managed was to hold yourself together for another hour, that's progress. You're not behind. You're just healing at your own pace. I'm proud of how far I've come. Not because everything's perfect, it never will be, but because I finally stopped needing it to be. Life doesn't have to be flawless to be beautiful. Sometimes the cracks are what let the light in, and for the first time in years, I can finally see that light again. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels, because maybe, somewhere out there, someone will hear it and feel a little less alone. And if you take anything from it, let it be this: you can't control who betrays you, but you can control who you become after. That's the real ending. The one where you don't just survive the pain, you rise from it.